I'm Bryan Nicol, Chief Strategy Officer for RS&H, and you're listening to AEC Perspectives. In today's episode, I'm joined by RS&H's thought leaders, Philip, Robbie, and Roddy Boggus, to discuss the state of architecture. I'm looking forward to understanding what prominent challenges the industry is facing, as well as emerging trends that will lead the architecture industry to success. Before we dive in, let me give you some background on both Philip and Roddy. With 30 years of international experience in all areas of architecture practices, Philip Robbie is the National Design Director for RS&H. He specializes in collaborative process and is a graphics facilitator. His frequent responsibilities include developing internal studios, mentoring staff, and facilitating design charrettes. His work has gained recognition in the profession through numerous AIA design awards. Roddy serves as Senior Vice President, Aviation Architecture for RS&H's aviation practice. Roddy brings 31 years of experience in the aviation multidisciplinary practices for U.S. and global organizations. He excels in both airline and airport-based practices and alternative delivery methods. Roddy also has a strong background in aviation and airport security, including product development, regulatory guideline contributions, design, and pragmatic deployment of existing technologies. Philip, Roddy, thank you so much for joining me today on AEC Perspectives. Let's get right into our questions. Philip, let's start with you. Can you give our audience an overview of RS&H's core design philosophy?
Sure, Bryan, thank you. It's really very straightforward. Work, context, form. It has to work. It has to work for its intended purpose. We have to know our building sciences. It has to be durable. It has to work. Context needs to be in context with the culture of the client, with the region that it's built, in context with the environment, in context. It has to represent form. The way we think needs to manifest itself in the architecture. It has to also represent that shared sense of beauty that we have. If you have the work, context, and form right, we nobly represent the emerging face of humanity.
Oh, I love that description because it captures that essence of how we approach our projects. Roddy, what would you say as you think about RS&H's core design philosophy and how Philip described it?
Well, I have to agree with Philip, and Philip, as you noted, is the National Design Director, and I think his words will be far more eloquent than mine. But I look at something that we talked about 4 or 5 years ago, and we as an industry, we as RS&H specifically want our best buildings to be able to uplift and affirm the people they're going to serve. We want them to kind of embody the elegance, if you will, of form and function. What does the building want to be, which is sometimes a lot different than what I may want it to be. We want it to be able to manifest its purpose on the people that are using it. We want it to have personality and spirit, but we also want to make sure it represents the sum of the parts of the people that use it and has the fingerprints of everyone, because I believe that it's not just my hand in that, it's the client's hand, it's the user's hand. So that's that embodiment of affirmation for every person that the building or facility that we design serves.
So that context that you've put out there for RS&H, we approach all of our projects in that kind of manner, working with our clients, engaging them, and then understanding the environment in which we bring that architecture into life, if you will. Is that right?
Oh yeah, I think anybody can stand up materials, but how to make it a living, breathing thing is really a lot of how success and how time-tested architecture maintains itself. So if we're unable to do that, we probably haven't done our job well. And that's why it's so important. Well, Philip and I get a chance to work together a lot. And that collaboration, along with the input and the voices and the fingerprints of our clients, I think blends a much better output.
Yeah. The market sector that you're active in, Roddy, is very sophisticated, the aviation market. And our clients on the other side, they're architects and engineers. They have high expectations, and we always meet and exceed those expectations. And they know a good service. So that's why you're so successful. And that's why our firm is so successful in aviation. You do a great job, Roddy. Thank you.
Oh, well, thanks, Philip. And let me just give you one example from that market that many of us don't think about. I think probably everybody that listens to this podcast has or will fly in an airplane. And, it's how you are interacting with your building. But think about the employees in that building that you're interacting with. If the building doesn't serve the employees well, and they'd start off their day having a bad day because something doesn't work, that impacts the rest of the day of all the flyers coming through the facility. So what we do has great impact on the personalities of the people that we come in contact with every day.
And I heard Philip at the beginning sort of weave in the work, the context, the form, the words like embodiment and sophistication, meeting our clients, not only for their own customers, but for their employees as well, all in a holistic approach from RS&H. Is that a good way of summing up what I just heard?
Yeah, well done.
All right. Well, let's work to our second question here. And I want to ask you both, and I'll start with Roddy on this one first, and then we'll move to you, Philip. What has fundamentally changed about the industry from when you started up until today?
So I'm going to be anxious to hear what Philip says, because there's multiple ways you can take this. So I graduated in architecture in 1985. At the time, I was the first person in my university in architecture that did my thesis on CAD. So I was part of that era that was big in the transition between handwork and computer work. And so one of the ways I got my jobs right off when I knew far less was ability to make computers sing. Since that time, we've watched our industry, specifically in architecture, transition a lot. We talk about Moore's law and the doubling of speed every year. I think it's a lot faster than that now. But we've seen, I think it cuts both ways. We've seen better and worse. We've lost a lot of the art of the practice of architecture, in as much as the handcrafting of design and construction documents. If you look back at the way blue lines looked, many times they were frameable because there was art in the creation of the documents to build a facility. We lost hand lettering, architectural lettering by hand, as we transitioned from pen and ink on paper, to computers. But we've gained so much as well with the speed and accuracy of what we can do with the computers, where there's computational design and how many different variations we can run, a lot of the sustainability and resiliency pieces that we can do very early on, even in pre-design, to set us up to be a lot more successful. So there is a yin and a yang here. I feel like, listen, I'm the last of the baby boomers. So somebody says, well, you drew on cave walls. So we've lost some of the cave wall aspect of it, which some people love, but we've also done a lot more as we go into the computerization stage and the speed of delivery. I'm still trying to determine where I fall and feel on this, but I believe we have redefined the standard of care that architects refer to, and I think that is constantly in a state of evolution.
Roddy and I are generally of the same generation. I'm older than Roddy. I graduated the first time in 1979 with it was a drafting degree. And then I went back for my professional degree. So when I walked into the workplace in 1979, the biggest thing that I noticed between then and now is, it was the way we treated each other. It was egregious. We worked 40, 60, 80 hours a week. And it was not why did we treat each other that way? Why did we treat interns that way? The biggest change I see right now is, we really look after each other. And certainly within our firm, it's like, there's a high degree of respect and care. And, when I walked into that studio in 1979, they were smoking cigarettes and drafting, parallels. And it was, you never saw the light of day. There was no windows. It was just and that was your life. It affected your family. It affected your well-being. And I am so glad, that the firm has changed. And I must say, I had my own practice for 18 years. And I have to say, RS&H, they treat me better than I treated myself. And so, it's one of the things that I really love about the new work environment. And we certainly try to, in my small strategy group, there's 5 of us, at the end of the day, when 5 o'clock comes, it's the bridge is down and surf is up and they're off to the beaches. And, I fully endorse that.
Well, I do think as you harken back to the late 70s and early to mid 80s, much has changed. The technology has changed markedly. One thing that struck me, Roddy, was this notion of the artist, the art of architecture. And do you think technology has taken that away? I mean, it's always been a creative process, but talk about how the industry's changed with respect to art and maybe or how are we adjusting in the modern day?
Well, I do think we've lost some of that. Now I have to really give it to Philip, although I'm not sure who you work for, Philip, because I still have those 40 to 60 hour weeks. But Philip is single-handedly bringing back a lot of the art and architecture in the groups I get to work with. We have lost, to me, a lot of the beauty of handwork, but we've captured things that we couldn't have captured before in the loss of that. So it's hard for me to determine if it's good or bad. But from the nostalgic side, a lot of our younger professionals, they no longer have hand lettering, architectural lettering classes, so they don't have the penmanship, if you will, that many people say, oh, architectural lettering, that looks so beautiful. Or even if you were just doing a door detail, by choosing your pen weight and how you drew it on ink and mylar, that part of the art is lost. If you go back and look to drawings in the 60s and 70s and before we really started going to CAD, you could pull out linen and blue lines and you could see things that by themselves were worthy of framing, and they were just construction drawings. So we've lost that, but we've also picked up some things that we never dreamed we could do. So
Roddy,
the
studios that you manage in aviation, you have always been like, I'm not sure where you're going with this, but go ahead and paint that picture out. And you're right about lettering. I mean, I look at some architectural lettering now, it looks like a ransom letter, and we always, you could always tell an architect by his lettering. But, I do see, in the design professions, you look at fashion, industrial design, automotive, they still are, there's a resurgence of the hand and the hand drawings, and certainly within RS&H. And let me illustrate. Oftentimes I'm modeling in 3D as I build models, and I have an LCD projector. I project it down onto a flat surface, and then I just use watercolors on top of that. Then I take that and we bring it back into artificial intelligence. The AI will run that and come up with several different other options, an iterative kind of design. Then we take that and we go back into the digital model that we're working in. So you step out of the digital flow in the traditional and then back into that digital flow. Time and time again, the oldest tool that we have is our hand. And when we bring that back into that design process, it energizes the creativity in ways that was unfathomable. That's one of the biggest joys I have of my position here today, is that people like you, Roddy, say, I don't know where you're heading with this, but I trust you.
Well, and you bring up a good point, Philip. I mean, I said earlier, you've kind of single-handedly, at least for me, brought back a lot of the handwork with your teaching of watercolor skills. And now with the technology we have, you can kind of do watercolor on your own, screen or iPad. But one of the things that I do have hope for, in addition to what you've talked about, I had a conversation yesterday, and we were talking about the advent of 3D printing buildings. And that is something that's really coming forth. And we were looking at some of the Federalist architecture, the Romanesque, and that type of thing, and the columns and all the fenestration that we used to have on there, whether it's entablature or something else. And 3D printing, where we've lost craftsmanship to be able to do some of the things that used to happen, especially in masonry, has brought back the ability to put a lot of decorative fenestration elements because we can 3D print it. So while it may not be the same, some of our tools are giving us capabilities that we thought we had lost, perhaps, in a new way. So it is an interesting time to live.
I want to talk about the work environment now that we've discussed that a little bit, because we've had some major changes in the last couple of years. And for many architects, their work environment changed during COVID-19, during the pandemic. What is different from your perspective, Philip, about the work environment now? And what do you what do you see, or what does normal look like going forward?
Just to give some context, our firm has 1,500 employees, 77 locations, 26 to 28 of those are design studios. So what happened, and I was in the corporate headquarters in Jacksonville, when the pandemic hit and we all went home, those silos of physical locations dropped, but yet there was a big bang of connectivity beyond the physical footprint. And what I found was there was a greater awareness and connectivity with all of my colleagues, and there was a sense of oneness that did not exist before the pandemic. I found that created almost a just-in-time delivery on design process. We could bring somebody from Chicago or the Denver office in for a 10-minute discussion and they disappear again. I didn't have to put them on a plane and fly them here, So we found these, the brain was rewired in a way that was highly productive and more engaged the intellectual resources of our firm. So, that was really powerful. And we crossed that threshold and we're not going back. And so we ask, what is the new normal? Well, for architects, it's like, I'm not even sure how to phrase it. It's kind of the desk that we used to sit at with the parallel now. And if you looked at my desk now, it's the total anchor man. I mean, I have to use OBS and mics. I fly through buildings. We have to convey ourselves in new and rich and visceral ways. So, we ended up with the total anchorman station, and it's really exciting.
I want to talk for a minute about some of the challenges that we're facing nowadays. And so we've talked about trends, we've talked about the pandemic, we've talked about some changes from when you started all the way up till today. Talk about some big challenges that are out there in architecture. Philip, why don't we start with you on this one?
It's not hard to understand where we need to be. You nearly need to watch the world news at night, and it doesn't matter which news you watch. You realize that the world needs us. It needs all of us. It needs every different type of us. And the challenges that we face is, don't become enamored with the tool you have. I mean, don't armor all your hammer drill. I mean, the world needs us, and you got to make a fuss. You got to raise your voice. You have to, when you're in a meeting and you see this thing heading off the tracks and all they're talking about is the cheapest, fastest building on the face of the planet. And somehow, how did I get into it? there's going to be a moment of dead air there. And you have 2 or 3 seconds to find those words and to say the things that need to be said. And sometimes it's an environment where they don't want to hear it, but you have that obligation. In our studios, we're trying to find the way to teach people, how to make that fuss, how to raise that voice, how to be, and it's not disobedient, it's highly respectful, but the world needs to hear what you have to say. And you can't just tell people what they want to hear. You have to tell them what they need to hear. So, in our group, there's high tech, low tech, no tech. High tech, it's all the things we talk about, Revit and BIM and artificial intelligence. Low tech, walking up there with that model and handing it to somebody, sketching on a wall as you talk. Then there's no tech. I mean, you have to find the words. You have to stand up. You have to go to the city council meetings. You have to be involved politically. You have to be there at your churches and supermarkets and schools. Find your voice. The world needs you.
Well, in today's incredibly changing environment regarding sustainability and resiliency issues, the kinds of things that we need to build in to all of our infrastructure, but certainly on the built environment of architecture and infrastructure broadly, the cheapest, fastest can get you there, but it also may be the cheapest and fastest to fall down, right? That the long-term sustainability of what we do is also a factor we need to think about. Roddy, what is your thoughts on what Philip just said here? I'm interested in your challenges as you see them through both the lens of your career, but also the lens of aviation.
Well, I think Philip hit a lot of them. My biggest concern, and I've got 6, and I'll go them really quickly. The commoditization of our services really concerns me. We have become, the competition is strong. We're hiring from each other. Which causes our own internal rates to rise. There's so many people going after work that very large clients can push, they can kind of control your margins. And so for the traditional design firm, I feel like we are rapidly being driven into commoditization. And it kind of gets to, oh yeah, I can give you something for that price. I don't know if I can give you what you want and expect and probably deserve for that price. So that is my biggest challenge and biggest concern. But as I look out, as Philip was doing, into where we are going, my challenges are in no particular order. We've got a dual threat here, which is the double aging city, a phenomenon that is the aging of the world population at the same time of the aging of the urban buildings that we have there. And so, we talk many times about, it kind of goes back to the baby boomers, but everybody will be there at some point in time. The buildings weren't designed for the aging population, and the buildings themselves are aging, and there's not enough funding or desire to bring both of those up. So how do we handle that? That's a societal question as well, but it fits very neatly in the toolbox of what architects and engineers have to be looking at. I think we're finally getting to the point, there's been so much politicizing of sustainability and resiliency, but we're getting to science-based climate action. And finally, over the past 5 years, I feel like that climate change is becoming something that we do as great design, not as an additional service, not because somebody wants lead points, but because we have to do it to be sustainable and have that resiliency. It's no longer a trend, but it's a necessity. And I think we're still working on getting there, but that's getting better. Smart materials, we have this advent now of a lot of smart materials to build with. How do you stay up with it? What's the right thing? Is there a lot of material coming on market that won't have proven itself? We're struggling mightily with concrete admixtures and fly ash, but now we have smart concrete. How does this work? How do we transform how we know to use concrete mixes? Something that Philip really introduced to me about 5 years ago was the biophilic urbanism. And that is, with all the building that we've done, especially in our large cities, we've done away with a lot of nature. We've displaced it. So how do we bring that back in to the facilities and the environments that we're now designing? And that's becoming a big topic. And that's a challenge to bring that in. We've had some clients that say, oh, I love them in pictures, but we don't want to maintain the biophilia. It's kind of hard for me to rationalize. And then I guess the biggest one, which is really very young, is designing in the metaverse. A good portion of the people that will occupy the facilities that we work on now live in the metaverse. And so a lot of their interaction is virtual, virtual social interaction. And the reality on public services and economy and leisure all kind of exists within what some people may say the unreal confines of the metaverse is. So as the world of work and play kind of evolve, I think, and it's maybe even hard to define this, we've got to be able, as architects and engineers, designers of what comes, we've got to learn to play in that alternate reality field and create an engaging place to work and play in. And that means some of our designs may wind up first being in a metaverse type of operation to determine, does the design fit the bill? And if you ask me what all that means, I'm going to give you a blank stare because I'm not really sure what done looks like there, but I feel like that's where we're going.
So I want to move from challenges because I think we think about challenges, but we also on the other side of that have to look at excitement. Like what is exciting? And you've hit on some of these, but I'd like you maybe to talk in a little more specificity about what excites you most right now about the architecture industry.
Well, I think the biggest excitement for me is that I and the people I work with get to be an author of this transition. One of the things I started out, we didn't go about this in the beginning, I started out as an electrical engineer. And when I transitioned over to architecture, I was very excited about the opportunity to start with a blank sheet of paper and then create something that's built that people interact with that started out with just a clean white sheet of paper. And I think it's kind of the same way. There are a lot of things happening and we get to author that transition. It is a double-edged sword. If we author it poorly, there's a lot of, trial and error in this, but that's excitement that we get to bring to our industry. And for the first time in a very long time, I feel like watching our industry transform rapidly from a master designer, master builder structure to a combination of experiential and AI design that's far more than just a sense of place. We are very rapidly having to transform to design a sense of being. And, I go back to Philip's philosophy at the beginning of a lot of holistic conversation. That sense of being is a much bigger nut to crack than a sense of place.
The perspective that I have is one I'm most thankful for. I see people coming into our strategy group that have deep concerns about society, and they are in their own minds as creative, visionary people, bringing with them not just the concern, but the tools that they'll need to rectify that. And as we bring those into our design workflow, it begins to acknowledge what the challenge is, and then this is what the fix is. Its easy example would be to look at our sustainability efforts. And as we rise up to that occasion, the demands of the 2030 challenge, AA 2030 challenge, are real. And, as we look at the different sustainability design guidelines, whether it is LEED, Green Globes, Living Building Challenge, you begin to see the tools that you're going to need to address that problem. In our studios, when we look at something in Ladybug or Dragonfly, and then we look at it again in Insight, then we look at it again in Safari, we're really tackling the challenge of making these buildings more resilient and more more responsible and more energy efficient. So that society, the concerns and the tools we have, you have to really listen though. You can't come in and say, I'm 66 years old. I've done this for 44 years. You listen to me. No, you have to be open. right? The other things that I see is the young design as we used to do, form manipulation. We worked in 2D. We draw a site plan, a floor plan, an elevation. Now we're working in 3D, and we create these forms, and then we explore them. We fly through our buildings with real-time render engines. And so what's happening is we're creating 3D documents because it's the way we're thinking. So we have virtual mock-up panels. We have our iPads where we take the buildings apart and put it back together again on the job site. You have that slipped into the back of your trousers as you climb up the ladder, and then you pull it out and engage with the craftsman. But that next stage, though, 2D, 3D, the next stage that I'm seeing is that there's the manipulation of the invisible, right? We look at reverb time in a space, and as that reverb time gets pushed down, there's a calmness. You look at the way the light comes through some of the stained glass elements in the ceiling, and it moves across the floor. There's a cadence with the day. You step outside and you feel a breeze come across. These are manipulations of the invisible and of pure energy. That really excites me, and when you walk into one of these buildings, not only does it look different, feel different, it is different.
That, in fact, is that sense of being combined with the societal perspective, combined with the technology and the metaverse. And so if you look back to the very beginning, can you believe we are where we are today?
I know. And like Roddy said, they view our generation as like spraying chalk out of your mouth through a hand silhouette in a cave in France somewhere. And, these things are, but it's not as generational as you think. I mean, I'm quite as comfortable. And I started out with punch cards, right? Drawing the Barcelona pavilion with punch cards. And here I am today as comfortable in this new environment. You just have to find the joy in it and go where the joy leads you.
I know back in the day when we had one computer, we would roll around on a cart. And now, as you say, you've got a smartphone that would result in 1,000 power of that computer, and you've got it in your hand, and then you're able to tie it into just such a broader approach to what you're doing, and a creativity it's a new creativity. One thing I like to do as we get toward the end of our podcast is give our audience some insight into each of you. And I've got some questions for you, just a couple here. And I would like you to tell us and tell our audience what comes to mind when I ask you the following question. So I'll go with you, Philip, first. What does RS&H's driven to care essence mean to you?
We look at our employees and we treat them, they're our colleagues. The people above us, we treat with respect. The colleagues adjacent to us, we extend in any way we possibly can help, like, Roddy and the others. And those people that are moving into the profession, you give them the care and guidance and everything you possibly can. For our clients, you understand who they are, and for society, the challenges that it's faced with. And so responding to society, embracing that culture within our firm, that those driven to care things, you live it every day, not by your words, but by your actions.
It is a holistic attitude. For me, driven to care is caring for each other, caring for the environment, caring for our clients. When I'm on a project, and like the projects that I'm on right now, it's a personal reflection of me. I take the project personally. If I fail the client, if I fail my team, it's a really bad week for me. And so in order to me to function as a fully functioning adult, which is sometimes questionable on a good day, I need to deliver the very best, because I expect, if I was working for me, to get the very best. So I really want to make sure that we are kind of like our statement at the beginning on design. that we're doing our best. We're caring about what we're delivering. It's not just a business. It's well beyond a business, that we're caring about the people that we're serving, that we're caring about the creations that we are creating and how they function, and that we're providing a very unique personality to the things that we do and the spirit that we leave behind that dwells, long after we leave. So for me, that driven to care essence is more than just words, a mission statement. It is really how individually we live our lives as associates at RS&H, but maybe more importantly is the outward illustration of how we do our job.
Well, thanks for sharing that very personal view of RS&H's essence of driven to care, and something we weave into all that we do in the firm. And I can see how important it is to you and how you take that to the people that you work with, the clients that you work for, and to society as a whole, as Philip said. What's one thing you do to support your own mental health and wellness, Roddy?
Well, I don't know that I do that very well, and so you can be the judge of that. But one of the things that I'm in now is the give back mode. So when I have the opportunity, whether it's within the organization of RS&H or within any outside of RS&H, is what can I do to start giving back? As I look back, my perspective on what's been given to me and what I've learned is huge. And even though some of my skill sets maybe come from an older school of thought, I still think there's value in those. So I've really been trying to find out within our associates, our younger associates, even within our clients, what can I do to help give back? One of the things I do to totally clear my mind, and my part about being myopic and shallow, plays very well in here, is I go to movies. I go to be entertained. If the movie's deep, I can't deal with that. I don't want to have to think. That helps support my mental health and wellness. And I also am part of an a cappella group, and I love to sing. And so I've recently been part of my first recording with about 100 other quartets that'll be coming out here in the next 2 weeks. And those type of things give me pause from my daily work environment, and I think help keep a little bit of balance for those that believe I can actually have it.
Philip?
Throughout my entire life, I've returned to my sketchbooks and running, and for different reasons at different times. Those things that brought you comfort in your youth are the same things that'll bring you comfort as you move through the different chapters. One thing that is really important is take care of your health. Really, I mean, this is the long game. Oscar Niemeyer was 102, right? So I'm just mid-career and I'm 66, right? So take care of your health.
One last question, and I want to end with this. What's been the most influential resource for your career?
For me, it's Laura, my wife. We've been married for decades, and I highly recommend significant others. It works for me. But in all seriousness, those somebody who's been with you through all those different chapters are able to give you perspectives on these situations outside of your own personal experience. And it all goes back to listening and being a meaningful part of that relationship. So I have to say, Laura.
All right. So now I got to give two answers because Philip, you just called me out. Many people have asked, Roddy, with your career and the way it's been and how much you've traveled all over the world, how have you stayed married? And this isn't a marriage counseling, podcast, but it was her decision, and so she has had a great effect on my career because she actually made trees for my model on my thesis project. So the more I think about it, she's been there for all of my career. But if I take that personal aspect out of that, which she's a huge part, is I think the term laissez-faire. And I'm going to couch this in because we're in the country that we're in and the opportunities that it affords you. I think the people that make up part of my being, in this case, my grandfather and my father, I think the biggest resource, influential, I don't know how that fits in, has been the ability for me, and Bryan, you're learning this, is that I don't take no for an answer very easily. No just means, okay, it's not this path, but if I step 2 steps to the right, it may be on another path. And I think that that's allowed me the ability to go down paths I wouldn't have gone down, to examine things I thought I knew that I found out that I didn't. And that ability to think broader than just your initial knee jerk was influenced greatly by the fact that we live in a place where we can do that, and being influenced by people like our spouses that also will say, Roddy, you know an airport. You walk in an airport and you know what to expect. You know where the restrooms typically are. You know how they work. Me as a non-airport designer and a passenger, I have to read all the signs. I can't process as fast as you. And so I have to learn it every time. And that dose of reality is fairly humbling at times. And I think constantly reinforces what I do and how I do it.
Well, this has been an absolutely fantastic conversation around the state of architecture, hearkening back to the 70s and early 80s, all the way up to artificial intelligence and 3D printing and all the myriad of issues that we're facing in today's environment, and how we interact not only with the people that we work with, our great clients that we're so honored to serve. It's been a real pleasure, Philip and Roddy, to speak with you today, to learn so much from you. I want to thank you for taking some time on this AEC Perspectives podcast and sharing all of those wonderful perspectives with me and our audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bryan.
Yeah, the pleasure was all mine.
Thank you for listening to this episode of AEC Perspectives. Follow or subscribe to AEC Perspectives wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And remember, at RS&H, we are driven to care.